They've made their decision. The lawyer's calm voice sliced through the silence of the hospital room harder than any knife ever could. Across the bed, my mother didn't even look at me. Instead, she reached for my older brother's trembling hand. "Everything belongs to Ethan," she whispered through the oxygen mask. "The company, the shares, the house, all of it." My fingers tightened around the paper cup in my hand until it crumpled. 20 years. 20 years of staying behind so Ethan could shine. 20 years of cleaning up every disaster he caused. 20 years of believing that if I worked hard enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, our family would finally see me. The lawyer hesitated. "And, Mr. Adrian?" Mother finally turned toward me. There wasn't hatred in her tired eyes. That would have hurt less. There was only indifference. "You've always been capable, Noah." Her voice was barely audible. "You'll survive." The room fell silent. No one protested. Not father. Not Ethan. Not even the family relatives lining the walls. As if everyone had already accepted that I deserved nothing. Ethan lowered his head, pretending to cry. "I'm sorry, little brother." His voice shook just enough to fool everyone. I never wanted this. I stared at him. A memory flashed across my mind. A financial report disappearing from my office. A forged signature. A failed investment that had somehow become my responsibility. Every disaster over the past 5 years had somehow landed on my desk. Every success had somehow carried Ethan's name. I'd always assumed I was simply unlucky. Now, looking at his lowered eyes, I wasn't so sure anymore. Mother's heart monitor suddenly screamed. Doctors rushed into the room. "Nurse, charged to 200. Everyone stumbled backward. I remained frozen, watching, listening, feeling absolutely nothing. A minute later, the long, continuous tone filled the room. Mother was gone. Rain hammered against the cemetery 3 days later. Black umbrellas covered the mourners like a sea of crows. Father stood beside Ethan, comforting him. I stood alone, not because there wasn't room, because no one thought to stand beside me. When the ceremony ended, relatives gathered around Ethan. "You have to stay strong. Your mother trusted you. The company needs its new chairman." Not one person asked how I was doing. I turned toward the parking lot. "Leaving already?" Ethan caught up with me, his expensive black coat untouched by the rain. "I know you're upset." I kept walking. "You can stop pretending now," I said quietly. His footsteps slowed. "What?" "You won." For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, a smile appeared. Small, crooked, real. I wondered how long it would take. I stopped walking. The rain soaked through my suit. "So, it was you. The reports." He chuckled. "The reports. The overseas investment. My idea. The fake emails. My assistant." He shrugged, as though discussing the weather. "You made everything so easy." My pulse pounded. "Why?" He looked genuinely confused. "Because you kept fixing everything." He laughed. "You know what Father always said? Noah will handle it. So I let you." His eyes gleamed. "Every failure became yours. Every success became mine. You never noticed because you wanted their approval more than the truth." Those words struck harder than any punch. Because they were true. I had spent years chasing affection from people who had already chosen someone else. "I won't expose you." His eyebrows lifted. "No, no." I opened my car door. "I'm done carrying this family." His smile faded for the first time. "What does that mean?" "It means..." I looked directly into his eyes. "You're finally on your own." I drove away before he could answer. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. 3 months later, the headlines exploded. Carter Group loses $380 million in failed acquisition. New CEO under investigation. Banks freeze credit lines. I watched the news from my tiny rented apartment. No phone calls. No desperate requests. No family meetings. Silence. They expected me to return eventually, to solve another crisis. Like always. Instead, I accepted an interview at a small technology startup that barely anyone had heard of. The office occupied half a warehouse. Second-hand desks. Old computers. Coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. The founder, Daniel Brooks, looked embarrassed. "I can't match your previous salary." "I know. I also can't promise success." "I know." He frowned. Then why are you here? Because no one here expected me to disappear so someone else could take credit. Because failure here would belong to all of us. Because success here would too. Instead, I simply smiled. I like to build something. Daniel extended his hand. Welcome aboard. As our hands met, my phone rang. Father. For the first time in months. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then I switched the phone off. 6 months passed before I heard my father's voice again. Not because he called, because he appeared. The startup office had grown louder since the day I joined. Whiteboards overflowed with diagrams. Prototype devices littered every desk. The air smelled of solder, coffee, and impossible ambition. Daniel burst from the conference room. Noah, investors are here. I adjusted my tie. We're ready. Before I reached the meeting room, the receptionist hurried toward me, her expression uncertain. There's someone insisting on seeing you. I have a meeting. He says he's your father. The words settled like dust. I walked to the lobby. Richard Carter stood beside the glass doors in a tailored suit that somehow looked older than I remembered. His shoulders, once impossibly straight, sagged beneath invisible weight. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. You've lost weight, he finally said. So have you. His eyes wandered across the office. This is where you've been? Yes. He gave a slow nod. It doesn't look like much. It wasn't supposed to. Silence stretched between us. I need your help. There was. Not how are you? Not I've missed you. Not even I'm sorry. Just 4 familiar words. I almost smiled. The company? He exhaled heavily. The banks are demanding repayment. And Ethan, he's trying. An interesting choice of words. What exactly do you need? The board will listen to you. No. His jaw tightened. You didn't even let me finish. I already know the ending. He stared at me. You come back. You save the company. Ethan keeps the title. You tell everyone it was teamwork. Color drained from his face. I never said that. You didn't have to. He rubbed his forehead. You've become cynical. No. I've become observant. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and immediately rejected the call. Ethan, he didn't answer, which was answer enough. You always believed he could become a leader, I said. I never argued. I only worked. His voice grew quieter. I know. No. I shook my head. You know now. He opened his mouth before closing it again. For the first time in my life, my father looked like a man who didn't know what to say. Daniel appeared from the hallway. Noah, everyone's waiting. I nodded. I'll be there. Father glanced between us. You're important here. I am. They trust you. Yes. He looked almost bewildered. As yourself. I met his eyes. As myself. He lowered his gaze. I don't think I ever gave you that. The sentence lingered in the air. It should have healed something. Instead, it simply arrived too late. I have a meeting. Noah. I paused. If everything falls apart. He swallowed. Will you regret walking away? I consider the question honestly. I regret staying as long as I did. Then I entered the conference room without looking back. 3 hours later, the investors signed. Not because of flashy promises. Because we had something real. Technology that reduced warehouse energy costs by nearly 40%. Months of sleepless nights. Dozens of failed prototypes. Work that belonged to everyone. Daniel could barely contain himself. We did it. The office erupted into cheers. Someone opened cheap sparkling cider. Another blasted music through worn speakers. Laughter echoed across the warehouse. No one asked who deserved the credit. No one whispered another person's name during congratulations. For the first time, success felt strangely quiet inside me. Not because it meant less, because I no longer needed anyone else's approval to make it matter. As the celebration continued, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. Mr. Carter? Speaking. My name is Detective Alvarez. Every sound in the office faded. I'm calling regarding Ethan Carter. My grip tightened around the phone. What happened? He was arrested approximately 1 hour ago. The words landed like stones. Arrested? On suspicion of corporate fraud. I closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind. The forged signatures. The missing reports. The vanished funds. The lies. The detective continued. We recovered evidence suggesting these activities began years ago. Years. So why call me? A brief pause followed. Because several documents indicate you may have been framed. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I'll need you to come downtown. I looked through the conference room window. Daniel and the others were still laughing. Building a future. While somewhere across the city, the past had finally started speaking. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and damp paper. Detective Sofia Alvarez slid a thick brown folder across the steel table. I suggest you open it. I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. You already know what's inside? I know enough to tell you that your brother's arrest wasn't an accident. Her voice carried no sympathy. Only facts. I finally opened it. The first page was a copy of my signature. Except, it wasn't mine. The shape was right. The spacing was right. Even the slight upward curve beneath the last letter had been copied perfectly. Yet I knew immediately it was fake. How many are there? 37. She turned another page. Then another. Loan approvals. Investment authorizations. Asset transfers. Every document carried my forged signature. Every one dated between 4 and 7 years ago. They were preparing long before the company collapsed. My stomach tightened. So Ethan planned this from the beginning. Alvarez folded her hands. We don't think you worked alone. I looked up. Meaning, there are board members who approved impossible transactions. She watched my expression carefully. And someone inside your family kept redirecting responsibility toward you. I didn't answer, because I already knew. The detective wasn't telling me anything I hadn't slowly begun realizing over the last year. She simply had evidence. There is another reason we contacted you. She pushed forward a flash drive. These security archives were recovered from an old backup server. What am I looking for? Watch them. Back at my apartment, rain tapped softly against the window. The city lights blurred across the glass. I inserted the drive into my laptop. The first recording showed my former office. Date: 6 years ago, the night before a disastrous overseas acquisition. The office lights were off. Then the door opened. Ethan walked inside. Not alone. Beside him was Victor Hale, chairman of Carter Group's board, a man my father trusted more than anyone outside the family. I leaned closer. The security camera had no sound, but I didn't need it. Victor unlocked my filing cabinet. Ethan removed several folders. They exchanged documents. Then, Ethan laughed. Victor patted him on the shoulder. Before leaving, Ethan paused at my desk. He carefully placed another folder exactly where the missing files had been. The next morning, those replacement documents had become the evidence proving my supposed incompetence. I froze the frame. Victor, not just Ethan. There had always been another hand moving the pieces. My phone buzzed. Daniel, you disappeared. I had somewhere to be. You okay? I looked at the paused image. No. A pause. Then, you don't have to explain. Another pause. But if you need someone to listen, I closed my eyes. How strange. 1 year with these people. Yet they offered more trust than my own family ever had. I appreciate it. We're family here. The call ended. Family. The word felt unfamiliar. The next morning, news vans surrounded Carter Group headquarters. Reporters shouted over one another. Mr. Carter, any comment on the fraud investigation? Where is Ethan Carter? Employees hurried inside without answering. Across the street, I watched from my parked car. Someone knocked on the passenger window. Father. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. I knew you'd come. I came to observe. He entered the passenger seat without asking. The police searched Ethan's office. I heard. They found offshore accounts. I heard. He laughed bitterly. You answer like a stranger. I looked straight ahead. That's what we are. His shoulders slumped. I deserve that. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, he whispered, I found your mother's journal. That sentence caught me completely off guard. My mother's. After the funeral, he reached into his briefcase. A worn leather notebook rested inside. I couldn't bear reading it then. His fingers trembled slightly. I started last night. He handed it to me. Take it. I hesitated. What does it say? I think. His voice cracked. I think we've misunderstood far more than Ethan. The notebook was lighter than I expected. The leather edges had softened from years of use, and a pressed lavender flower rested between the first pages. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I looked at my father. You've had this since she died. Yes. And you're only giving it to me now. His eyes lowered. I wasn't ready. No. I slipped the notebook into my bag. You weren't willing. The words hurt him. I could see it. Years ago, that sight would have satisfied something inside me. Now it only made me tired. He stared through the windshield. When your mother became ill, she was terrified. Of dying? No. He swallowed. Of what would happen to this family. I waited. She believed keeping peace was more important than fairness. A bitter smile crossed my face. So she sacrificed the easier son. He closed his eyes. I never stopped it. No, you didn't. He reached for the door handle. I don't expect forgiveness. I know. But if you read the journal... He stopped. Read every page. Then he stepped into the crowd of reporters and disappeared. I waited until night before opening the notebook. The first entries were ordinary. Gardening, recipes, doctor appointments, small observations about rainy afternoons. Then, 2 years before her death, the tone changed. Ethan lies so naturally now. I stared at the sentence. Another page. Richard says boys compete. He believes Noah shouldn't be told every truth because he will understand. Another. Noah apologized today for something Ethan broke. He didn't even know the vase wasn't his fault. My chest tightened. Another. I wanted to tell him. But Richard said protecting Ethan now would preserve the company's future. My breathing slowed. Page after page. She had noticed everything. She had written about Ethan manipulating teachers, employees, relatives. About father dismissing every concern. About her own silence. Then came an entry dated 6 months before she died. Noah smiled today after fixing another crisis Ethan created. He still thinks we don't know. He protects everyone, even from themselves. I fear one day he will stop coming home. I stopped reading. The apartment was completely silent. Not because there was nothing left to hear. Because there was too much. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Daniel stood outside carrying 2 paper bags. I guess you hadn't eaten. You guessed right. He stepped inside without asking questions. We sat across from each other, eating takeout noodles in silence. After several minutes, he noticed the journal. Family. I nodded. Complicated. I laughed quietly. That's one word for it. He didn't ask to read it. Didn't ask what happened. Didn't offer advice. Instead, he simply said, you know, when my company almost failed 5 years ago, everyone left. I looked at him. The people who stayed became the only people I call family. He shrugged. Blood starts a relationship. Choice keeps it alive. His words settled somewhere deep inside me. For years, I had mistaken obligation for love. Maybe they had never been the same thing. My phone vibrated. Detective Alvarez. I've got something. What is it? We questioned Victor Hale today. And he denied everything. I wasn't surprised. But, she continued, he slipped. Ow! He admitted there was another copy of the financial ledgers. I straightened in my chair. Where? He refused to say. My heartbeat quickened. But we traced a storage unit rented under a shell company. She paused. We're executing a search warrant tomorrow morning. If those ledgers exist, they could expose every transaction, every forged signature, every hidden payment, every board member, every lie. I looked toward the journal still resting on the table. My mother's final fear echoed in my mind. I fear one day he will stop coming home. She had been right. I had stopped, but not because I stopped loving them. Because I finally understood that love without truth only feeds deception. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Somewhere in the darkness, men who had believed their secrets were buried were about to discover that paper could outlive power. And by sunrise, someone would desperately try to make sure those ledgers were never found. By the time I reached the police station the next morning, the parking lot was already crawling with reporters. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Someone recognized me. Mr. Carter, did you know about the hidden ledgers? Are you returning to Carter Group? I kept walking. For years, I would have stopped. I would have explained, defended, protected. Today, silence was enough. Detective Sofia Alvarez met me near the evidence room. We found the storage unit. Her expression was unreadable. And it wasn't empty. A flicker of relief crossed my mind. But it wasn't intact either. She led me into a conference room. Several cardboard boxes sat on the table. Most of the files inside were soaked, burned around the edges. Someone had tried to destroy them in a hurry. When? Less than 12 hours before we arrived. So someone warned them. She nodded. We believe there's a leak. I picked up a half-burned ledger. Entire sections had turned to ash. Yet dozens of entries remained readable. One name appeared repeatedly. Hale Strategic Holdings. Another. Sterling International Consulting. Both companies had approved payments worth tens of millions of dollars. None of them had ever appeared in Carter Group's official financial reports. Alvarez pointed to one page. Look here, beneath an authorization number. A handwritten note. Temporary transfer. Noah will take responsibility if questioned. My fingers froze. There it was. Not an assumption. Not suspicion. Not memory. Proof. Someone had planned to make me the scapegoat years before everything collapsed. You'll need this. Alvarez handed me certified copies. The originals stay with us. I nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. You don't seem angry. I looked at the burned paper. I was. When? The day I realized they never intended to tell the truth. And now, I'd rather know the truth than waste another day hating them. She studied me for a moment. I wish more people thought that way. Outside the station, my phone rang. Father. I answered this time. Hello. His voice sounded strained. Can we meet? I have work. It concerns Victor. My steps slowed. What about him? He resigned. That surprised me. When? 30 minutes ago. And he disappeared. Victor Hale's mansion overlooked the river. By the time Father and I arrived, the front gates stood open. Police vehicles lined the driveway. An officer stopped us. No one enters. Detective Alvarez approached from a porch. You got here quickly. My father called. She looked toward the house. Victor left sometime during the night. Escaped. Perhaps. She lowered her voice. Or perhaps someone helped him disappear. Inside the mansion, investigators photographed everything. Luxury watches. Expensive paintings. Empty safes. The office looked almost untouched. Too untouched. I stepped toward the bookshelf. One shelf seemed slightly uneven. Instinct. Nothing more. I pressed against it. A soft click echoed through the room. The bookshelf shifted. A hidden compartment. Inside, only a single envelope. Alvarez carefully opened it. One photograph slid onto the desk. It showed Ethan, Victor, and another man. Older, silver-haired, standing beside a private jet. Father's face drained of color. No. You know him? His voice barely escaped. Harold Mercer, the founder of Mercer Capital, one of the country's largest investment firms. A man respected by politicians, business leaders, charities. A legend. Alvarez looked between us. You've met him? Father nodded slowly. He invested in Carter Group 20 years ago. I stared at the photograph. Another player. Another layer. The game had always been larger than our family. That evening, Daniel insisted I leave the investigation behind for a few hours. We're celebrating. What happened? He grinned. Our energy platform just landed its first international contract. The office erupted into applause. Programmers high-fived engineers. Designers hugged accountants. No one cared who received credit. Watching them, I realized something uncomfortable. I was smiling. Genuinely. Not because the past had disappeared. Because my future no longer depended on it. Daniel raised a paper cup. To everyone who refused to quit. The room echoed the toast. As everyone laughed, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Another message followed immediately. You survived once. Don't test your luck again. I stared at the screen. No signature. No number. Just a burner phone. Daniel noticed my expression. Everything okay? I locked the phone. Someone doesn't like detectives. His smile disappeared. Police. They know. You. I'm staying. He nodded once. Then we're staying too. You don't have to. He laughed. You still don't understand this place. Before I could answer, nearly everyone in the office had gathered around. Emily from engineering folded her arms. If someone's threatening our operations, we deserve to know. It's personal. So, Marcus from finance shrugged. Personal problems don't become smaller by carrying them alone. I looked around the room. No pity. No curiosity. Only quiet support. Something inside me shifted. For years, I had believed strength meant enduring everything in silence. Maybe real strength also meant allowing trustworthy people to stand beside you. The next morning, Detective Alvarez called before sunrise. We found Victor, alive. No. The single word settled heavily. Where? His yacht. She paused. It looks like suicide. I stopped walking. Looks like there are inconsistencies. What kind? He packed for a 2-week trip. He transferred money yesterday. He scheduled meetings for next month. People planning tomorrow rarely ended their lives today. What do you need from me? Recognition. Victor Hale lay beneath a white sheet inside the city morgue. His face was strangely peaceful, almost relieved. Father stood silently near the doorway. I never thought. His sentence faded. Alvarez approached carrying a sealed evidence bag. This was found inside his jacket. She removed a folded piece of paper. Only 6 words have been written. Mercer protects his own investments. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. No confession. Just a warning. Father whispered. Harold Mercer, his voice trembled, would kill to protect his empire. Alvarez folded the note. Then we're dealing with someone who has money, influence, and friends everywhere. I looked once more at Victor's motionless face. For years, he had believed himself untouchable. In the end, he had become disposable. As we walked outside, another police vehicle pulled into the parking lot. An officer hurried toward Alvarez. We got a problem. What happened? The bank notified us early this morning. What bank? Mercer Capital just acquired controlling interest in what's left of Carter Group. Father's knees nearly gave way. They bought it. The officer nodded. Effective immediately. The company my grandfather had built. The company my father had sacrificed everything to preserve. Now belonged to the very man whose shadow had appeared behind every lie. Across the street, a black luxury sedan slowed beside the curb. The rear window lowered just enough for an elderly man with silver hair to glance in my direction. Harold Mercer. He smiled politely, as though greeting an old acquaintance. Then the window rose again. The car disappeared into traffic. Without a single word, he had declared war. Harold Mercer never called. He didn't need to. By noon, every major business network carried the same headline. Mercer Capital completes emergency acquisition of Carter Group. Commentators praised him as a visionary, a legendary investor saving another failing company, a master of corporate recovery. The markets trust Mercer. I muted the television. Truth had never moved as quickly as money. My phone rang. Detective Alvarez. Turn on Channel 8. I already have. Not the business report. I switched channels. A press conference was underway. Harold Mercer stood behind a polished podium, silver hair immaculate, navy suit perfectly tailored. He smiled with effortless confidence. Carter Group has suffered from years of irresponsible leadership. Cameras flashed. My priority is protecting employees and shareholders. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Mercer, were you aware of the fraud investigation before purchasing the company? His smile never changed. We performed thorough due diligence. Another reporter asked, what about your long relationship with Victor Hale? Mercer sighed softly. Victor was a respected businessman. He made unfortunate personal choices. In business, accountability matters. He had already buried Victor. Without hesitation, without gratitude, without emotion. I watched silently. The man didn't merely erase problems. He erased people. That afternoon, Detective Alvarez met me inside the Financial Crimes Division. She closed the office door. We've been reviewing Victor's encrypted laptop, and we finally cracked part of it. She projected several emails onto the wall. None carried names. Only initials. HM, VH, EC, Harold Mercer, Victor Hale, Ethan Carter. The oldest message dated back nearly 8 years. HM, the younger son remains useful. Continue directing liability toward him. My breathing slowed. The next message. VH. Richard remains unaware. Another. EC. No suspects, nothing. The room fell silent. 8 years. They hadn't simply framed me. They had monitored me, studied me, used my loyalty as a business strategy. Alvarez enlarged another attachment. A spreadsheet appeared. Columns, payments, transfers, political donations, consulting fees. One line caught my attention. Project Phoenix. What is that? We don't know. She highlighted the amount beside it. $620 million. Far larger than every fraudulent transaction combined. Whatever Phoenix is, she looked directly at me. It was the real objective. So Carter Group was only one piece. That evening, Father came to my apartment carrying a cardboard box. I found these. Inside were old photographs, employee directories, board meeting minutes, company newsletters. I've been searching through the archives. He placed a faded group photograph in front of me. This was taken 23 years ago. Grandfather stood in the center, young, confident. Beside him stood dozens of executives, including a much younger Harold Mercer, and a woman I immediately recognized. My mother. She wasn't standing beside Father. She was standing beside Grandfather, reading a financial report. She worked for him? Father nodded. She was his financial analyst. I never knew. I never told you. I looked up sharply. What? His expression filled with regret. Because your grandfather trusted her more than anyone. And Mercer hated that. A chill ran through me. Father continued quietly. Your grandfather refused to sell Carter Group. Mercer wanted control. But he couldn't buy it. He waited years, decades, until grandfather died, until father inherited, until Ethan became easy to manipulate, until I became convenient to sacrifice. The realization settled over both of us. This hadn't begun with my generation. It had begun long before I was born. The following morning, Daniel walked into my office carrying a tablet. You should see this. He placed it on my desk. A government procurement announcement filled the screen. Project Phoenix. I stared at the title. This can't be coincidence. Daniel shook his head. Our software team recognized the project code. What is it? A nationwide smart energy infrastructure contract. I looked at the estimated value. More than $12 billion. Mercer hadn't wanted Carter Group. He had wanted its patented energy distribution technology. The technology my grandfather had quietly developed decades earlier. Daniel frowned. There's something else. He opened another file. Carter Group still owns one missing patent. What do you mean missing? It was never transferred. According to the registry. He smiled slightly. The patent belongs to a private trustee. Who? He turned the screen toward me. The registered trustee's name appeared. Margaret Carter. My mother. I immediately remembered the journal. The final pages. The ones I hadn't finished reading. I hurried home. The journal lay exactly where I had left it. Hands trembling slightly, I turned the remaining pages. Most were filled with reflections on illness. Then, 3 weeks before her death, one final sealed envelope had been taped inside the back cover. My name covered the front in my mother's handwriting. I carefully opened it. Inside rested a legal document. A trust agreement. Signed. Witnessed. Officially notarized. Attached was a handwritten letter. Noah, if you're reading this, then I failed to protect you while I was alive. I stayed silent too many times. I believed peace required sacrifice. I was wrong. Your grandfather knew someone would eventually try to steal everything he built. So he created one final safeguard. The core patent can only be transferred with the unanimous consent of the trustee. I refuse to sign. If I am gone, the trusteeship passes only to you. My vision blurred. Another paragraph waited below. Ethan never knew. Richard never knew. Harold Mercer never knew. Forgive me for waiting too long. Don't save the company. Save the people inside it. I slowly lowered the letter. Everything changed. Mercer owned the company. But without that patent, Project Phoenix could never proceed. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Detective Alvarez entered with Father close behind. You need to come with us. What happened? She looked unusually serious. Mercer's attorneys just filed an emergency injunction. For what? They somehow learned the patent still exists. Father's face hardened. They're coming for you. Before anyone could say another word, the apartment lights suddenly went out. The entire building fell into darkness. Outside, car doors slammed. Several footsteps echoed rapidly through the hallway. Someone stopped outside my apartment door. Then, the handle began to turn. The apartment door rattled once. Then again, harder. Father instinctively stepped in front of me. "Stay back." Detective Alvarez had already drawn her service weapon. "Police," she shouted toward the hallway. "Identify yourselves." Silence answered. Then hurried footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Running away. Alvarez unlocked the door in a single motion and rushed into the hallway. By the time we followed, the corridor was empty. Only the emergency lights glowed faintly against the concrete walls. An elderly neighbor cautiously opened her apartment door. "They just left?" she whispered. "How many?" Alvarez asked. I think 4. "Were they armed?" I couldn't tell. She hesitated. But one of them kept saying, her voice shook, "Get the document before the police do." Alvarez exchanged a look with me. "They know." Within an hour, 2 detectives had sealed my apartment as a temporary evidence site. The trust agreement and my mother's letter were placed inside an evidence envelope. "I don't want these leaving your sight," I told Alvarez. "They won't." She looked toward the dark window. Mercer made his move sooner than expected. Father sat quietly on the sofa, staring at the floor. For nearly 20 minutes, he hadn't spoken. Finally, he looked at me. "I failed both of you." I remained silent. I chose the company. I chose appearances. I chose the son who demanded everything. His voice cracked. Instead of the one who quietly carried everything. The words were painfully honest. Not dramatic. Not desperate. Simply true. "I don't expect forgiveness." He looked older than I had ever seen him. "But before this ends, I need you to know that I finally see you." For years, those words have been all I wanted. Now, they no longer had the power to erase the past. But they mattered. Not enough to heal every wound. Enough to begin acknowledging one. "I believe you." His eyes widened slightly. "But believing you isn't the same as forgetting." He nodded. "I understand." For the first time in decades, neither of us tried to pretend things were fixed. The following morning, Mercer Capital announced a nationwide press conference. Every financial network covered it live. Harold Mercer stood confidently before hundreds of reporters. Carter Group's future begins today. Behind him, enormous screens displayed Project Phoenix. Our engineers have spent years preparing. Years. A carefully chosen word. He was claiming work that had never belonged to him. Then a reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Mercer, rumors suggest ownership of the core patent remains disputed." Mercer's smile barely shifted. "There are many rumors. The legal ownership is clear. It will be resolved shortly." I muted the television. He was bluffing. He didn't have a patent. He needed me to panic. Instead, my phone rang. "Daniel, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit." He laughed softly. "It usually is." Then his tone became serious. "What if we stop reacting?" "What do you mean?" "We've spent weeks responding to Mercer. What if we force him to respond to us?" I leaned back. "I'm listening. Our technology, our investors, our reputation." He smiled through the phone. "Let's build something Mercer can't buy." Those words lingered long after the call ended. For years, I had measured victory by what my family lost. Daniel reminded me that real victory was measured by what I could still create. That afternoon, our startup signed 3 new strategic partnerships. Not because of the Carter scandal, because our products actually worked. Engineers celebrated another successful prototype. Young interns debated future expansion. No one mentioned revenge. No one discussed Mercer. Life continued. Watching them, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. 3 days later, the courthouse overflowed with journalists. Mercer Capital had filed an emergency petition demanding immediate transfer of the patent trust. Their argument was simple. Martyr Carter had died. Therefore, all remaining intellectual property should automatically belong to Carter Group. Their lawyers sounded confident, almost rehearsed. I sat quietly beside Detective Alvarez and Father. Daniel occupied the row behind us with several members of our startup. Not because they understood corporate law, because they refused to let me stand alone. The judge entered. Court is now in session. Mercer's lead attorney rose first. The ownership question is straightforward. He confidently displayed company records, historical acquisitions, shareholder agreements, corporate restructuring documents. Everything appeared flawless. Then the judge turned toward us. "Mr. Carter, do you wish to respond?" I stood. "No lengthy statement, Your Honor." I placed a single folder on the evidence table. "This trust agreement." The courtroom grew silent. The clerk handed the documents to the judge. He adjusted his glasses. "Read one page, then another." His expression slowly changed. "These documents establish an independent trusteeship." Mercer's attorney immediately objected. "We challenge authenticity." Detective Alvarez calmly stood. "The originals were recovered during an active criminal investigation. They have already been verified." Another silence. The judge continued reading. Then he reached my mother's handwritten letter. He paused. Without reading aloud, he looked toward Mercer. "Did your client know this trust existed?" Mercer's attorney hesitated. "No." That single answer changed everything. The judge closed the file. "Then this court cannot transfer property that the petitioner does not legally own." Emergency petition denied. A wave of whispers swept through the courtroom. Mercer's attorney hurried outside without another word. For the first time, Harold Mercer had lost in public. Not because I defeated him, because the truth had finally reached the courtroom before his influence did. Outside the courthouse, cameras surrounded me. "Mr. Carter, do you consider this revenge?" I stopped walking. "No." Reporters leaned closer. "My family made painful choices. My brother committed crimes. Others abused trust. I can't change any of that." A reporter asked, "Then why keep fighting?" I looked across the street, where employees from the old Carter Group quietly watched from behind the crowd. Many had worked beside my grandfather. Many had believed the lies about me. Some lowered their heads in shame. I simply answered, "Because people deserve the truth. After that, they deserve the chance to build something better." I walked away before another question could be asked. No celebration, no triumphant smile, only a quiet sense that the weight I had carried for so many years no longer belonged on my shoulders. As evening settled over the city, Detective Alvarez received a call. She listened without speaking. Then she looked at me. Mercer's chief financial officer just requested immunity. Father slowly stood. "What does that mean?" Alvarez allowed herself the smallest smile. "It means someone inside Mercer's empire has decided to tell the whole story." The final wall protecting Harold Mercer had begun to crack. And this time, it wasn't because anyone attacked it. It was because the people inside no longer wanted to hold it up. The city awoke beneath a blanket of gray clouds. By 8 in the morning, every news channel had interrupted its regular programming. Breaking news. Mercer Capital executive accepts immunity deal. I watched the broadcast from Daniel's office. No celebration. No anticipation, only quiet attention. A knock sounded against the open door. Detective Alvarez entered carrying 2 sealed evidence boxes. "It's over." Daniel looked at her. "You sound certain." "I am." She placed the boxes on the conference table. The chief financial officer talked for 14 hours. She opened the first box. Inside were contracts, transfer records, private correspondence, every document carefully cataloged. He confirmed Project Phoenix was built on stolen research. She opened the second box. This contains every illegal payment Mercer authorized over the last decade. Father slowly sat down. "So Victor was never the mastermind." Alvarez nodded. "He was useful. And Ethan, he believed Mercer would make him chairman forever." She paused. "When Ethan became a liability, he was abandoned, exactly like Victor. Exactly like everyone else. Mercer had never built loyalty, only dependency." Daniel quietly folded his arms. "People like him always think money is stronger than trust." I looked toward the windows overlooking the city, and eventually they discover it isn't. 2 days later, the Federal Financial Crimes Court overflowed with journalists, prosecutors, and corporate executives. Harold Mercer entered without his usual smile. For the first time, cameras captured uncertainty instead of confidence. The prosecutor stood. The government charges Harold Mercer with conspiracy, corporate fraud, securities manipulation, bribery, obstruction of justice, and organized financial corruption. One charge after another echoed through the courtroom. Mercer's attorneys objected repeatedly. Each objection was calmly overruled. Then came the witness testimony. The former chief financial officer described shell companies, hidden accounts, destroyed records, bribed officials. Finally, he looked directly toward Mercer. "You ordered Victor Hale's removal." The courtroom erupted. Mercer's face remained expressionless, but his fingers tightened around the edge of the defense table. The prosecutor presented another exhibit. Emails, the same ones Detective Alvarez had shown me, this time enlarged before the entire courtroom. The younger son remains useful. The prosecutor spoke quietly. For years, Mr. Noah Carter was intentionally framed to conceal financial crimes. Every camera turned toward me. I remained seated. No anger, no satisfaction, only silence. The judge eventually looked toward Mercer. "Do you wish to respond?" For nearly 10 seconds, Harold Mercer said nothing. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and quietly answered, "I underestimated one thing." The courtroom waited. I believed loyalty could always be purchased. He looked toward me for the first time since our brief encounter outside the morgue. I was wrong. Those were the only honest words anyone had heard from him. The judge adjourned until sentencing. Mercer was escorted away in handcuffs. Without applause, without drama, without dignity. Power had left him as quietly as it had once arrived. 3 months later, the Carter Group headquarters looked different. Not because the building had changed, because the atmosphere had. The investigation had ended. Mercer Capital had been dismantled through court orders and asset seizures. Harold Mercer received a lengthy prison sentence. Victor Hale's crimes were officially recorded. Ethan accepted a plea agreement and began serving his sentence. The board members who had participated in the conspiracy were permanently barred from holding executive positions. Consequences: nothing more, nothing less. Father asked me to meet him one final time. Not in the old headquarters, not at the family home, at grandfather's favorite public park. He sat on a wooden bench feeding birds. When I approached, he smiled gently. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't." He nodded. I would have understood. For several minutes, we simply watched children playing nearby. Finally, he spoke. "I sold the house." I looked at him. The memories were too heavy. He handed me a small wooden box. Inside rested grandfather's fountain pen, the one he had used to sign the company's earliest contracts. "He wanted you to have this. You kept it all these years." I thought Ethan should inherit everything. His eyes filled with quiet regret. I finally realized inheritance isn't about favoritism. It's about responsibility. I closed the box. "I'll take care of it." He smiled. I know. There were no dramatic embraces. No miraculous reconciliation. Some wounds had become scars. Scars didn't disappear, but they no longer bled. Before leaving, Father quietly said, "I'm proud of the man you became." This time, I believed him. 1 year later, Daniel's startup had become one of the fastest-growing clean energy companies in the country. Employees filled 3 floors instead of half a warehouse. The old coffee was still terrible. Some traditions deserved to survive. Daniel laughed as he handed me a report. "We've officially surpassed Carter Group's highest annual revenue." I looked around the office. Emily argued with Marcus over a product launch. Interns rushed between meeting rooms. Someone had decorated the break room for an employee's birthday. It felt alive, not because it was perfect, because everyone belonged. A young engineer approached my office nervously. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. I made a mistake on yesterday's presentation." He looked terrified. "I'll fix it." I smiled. "We'll fix it." His shoulders relaxed immediately. After he left, Daniel leaned against the doorway. "You know." "What?" "You've become the kind of leader people hoped existed." I looked at the fountain pen resting on my desk. Grandfather's pen, my mother's letter, the trust agreement. None of them had made me wealthy. They had simply reminded me what wealth was actually for. Years ago, they picked my brother. They believed titles, inheritance, and approval determined a person's worth. They were wrong. I became a billionaire, not because I inherited an empire, but because I finally stopped trying to earn love from people unwilling to give it, and started building value with people who chose to stand beside me. As the sun set beyond the glass windows, laughter drifted through the office. I smiled quietly and returned to work. This time, I was exactly where I belonged,